Hey guys, so I'm getting used to this like low light thing. From those other videos I do. It's kind of great for my eyes, so we're gonna have fun with it. I know it's kind of weird seeing like my face lit from the bottom. I mean, it's weird for me. Because usually when you're looking at the mirror or something, that's not where the light source is. It's kind of fun. It's kind of fun to see like the opposite look, the opposite shadows, like this Cro-Magnon brow ridge going on. That's good. That's sexy. It's a good one. You like it? You like that like Neanderthal look? It's a good one. Anyway, I wanted to make this video to talk about coronavirus and how we've been dealing with it in Korea, what the mood is and stuff here. So to talk about that, I have to talk about the MERS situation. MERS is Middle East Respiratory Syndrome. Do you say respiratory or respiratory? I say respiratory. I used to say respiratory, but I think respiratory is easier to say. So that outbreak happened in Korea, only Korea, not even the Middle East, as far as I know. So the 2015 was only in Korea. That was it, and the reason was because there's a lot of Korean engineers that get work in the Middle East, in places like Dubai, for example. And I guess somebody had picked it up, brought it back, and when his doctor said, "Hey, you need to be on quarantine because you shouldn't be passing this around," the guy was basically like, I got a golf trip I paid for, so And he went and spread it. And China responded by locking down everything because his golf trip was in China. So the flight, everyone that was on the flight, everyone that was on the bus, tour bus on the way there, and anybody else he could come in contact with, everyone had to be quarantined. And we ended up having this weird situation because, there's all sorts of different. There's the scientific view of stuff, and then there's how people interpret the science. There's a common problem. I think Professor Stick points it out a lot. I don't know if you guys watch Professor Stick on YouTube, but I think he's great. And he points out a lot that there's this issue that the scientific study might say one thing, but the way that the reporters pull out that information to make it seem like an exciting title, and then some of the stuff they might say in the article as well, that might misrepresent what the science is. And unfortunately, most people don't read the scientific article, they read the news headline, not even necessarily the news article. And because of that, we end up with these different views that are not supported by scientific evidence. So that happens everywhere. In Korea specifically, what we get is this idea that you can't really like covering your mouth when you cough or whatever is just not that big of a deal. Going to work sick, not big a deal. Sharing food, not a big deal. And it's interesting because, when I first came to Korea, people always talk about it because there's this belief that foreigners cannot handle Korean food, whether it's kimchi, spicy food, which, by the way, Korea's spice level on the Scoville units is probably one of the lowest out there. So I don't know why Koreans believe their food is spicier than everything else. Because a lot of Koreans can't even handle their own spicy food. It's really weird. So they just, for some reason, think that foreigners can't handle spicy food, even though foreign food, on average, is spicier than Korean food, except for European food. And then Koreans themselves can't even handle their own version of spice a lot of the times. I don't know, it's just kind of weird to me. That you can't use chopsticks, but one of the other beliefs or myths or cultural beliefs they have is that foreigners are automatically uncomfortable sharing food, especially with strangers. And I don't think that counts as the same as their belief that like we can't use chopsticks or something, because it's like true. You shouldn't be sharing food with strangers, especially if they're sick. However, my thing that made me feel comfortable about it was that, well, all these other people are sharing food and they seem to not be sick doing it, so maybe I'm over worried about it. Especially as an American, there's a lot of stuff that we just won't eat that other people in other countries eat that we think is dangerous, unsanitary. A great example would be raw beef. That's not something you typically would find in the United States because we're taught that raw food is dangerous. Raw eggs is another one that happens in other cultures. Places in Europe eat raw meats. There's a raw pork dish from Germany. I forget what it's called. But like for us, we kind of freak out about it. So I thought maybe this is just an over freaking out kind of thing. Maybe we overdid it in America and we're over worried. So The problem is when someone is sick, you just shouldn't share their food. You know, maybe if you and your friends are not sick, maybe it's not that big of a deal. But when somebody is sick, you should probably not share your food. And if there's an epidemic going around for a virus that isn't naturally occurring in your region, definitely don't share food. Definitely don't go to work sick. Definitely quarantine yourself. But Koreans, they tend to overemphasize their work and their school if they're still in school. So because of that, we still had people going to school, people going to work that were still sick. And the government recommended that people wear those like sick masks, and a lot of people did, but most people didn't. The students don't understand how to use a hand sanitizer. I mean, they know what it is and they know how to use it, but I'm saying, you don't touch it with your hand. You kind of hit it with your elbow or even your fist. You open doors with your elbow. If you wash your hands and your hands are wet, you don't go turn the knob of the bathroom and then leave it wet, soaking there for the next person to touch a wet doorknob. Like, just stuff like that. They just didn't know. They didn't know that you should sneeze into your elbow instead of sneezing into your hands or sneezing into the air. Same with coughing. And so MERS spread. And in fact, half of the MERS cases, they came from a single hospital because the person who was working at the hospital got sick with MERS and continued to come to work. So now with the coronavirus, which I think has a new name, I saw it and I forgot. It's like, I know the old name was 2019-nCoV, but I know they shortened it to something. I'm not sure it has an official name, so I'll just call it SARS-2, okay? So SARS-2 shows up, and I think because of the MERS situation, Koreans kind of learned a little bit better. So a lot of people are wearing masks. Most of the people that aren't wearing masks are older than me. So they're the stubborn elderly people that think that they know everything, which isn't just unique to Korea, as you probably know. The students that I have now, they would have been younger students that would have been my age group back in 2015, and now I'm teaching that age group as if we grew together. I don't know if that makes sense. Now is 2019 or 2019 and 2020. They know how to use stuff with their elbow. They know not to do high fives. They know to do like elbow touches. They know how to open doors with their elbow. They know, that kind of stuff. I saw like students, when we have one of the doors that doesn't shut all the way, so you can't turn the knob to open it. You can just pull the knob. You don't turn it. But because you can stick your hand like in the door jamb almost, he just pulled the door open from the side, which is what I do to get into the same door. And I just thought, great, nobody taught him that at the school. He learned that from somebody else, from his previous school, maybe the previous outbreak, maybe his family. So it's like there's more education about it, which is really great. We actually had an extra week off of work too. We had Lunar New Year, which was a week off. Lunar New Year is just a really long holiday, which is pretty cool. A lot of people call it Chinese New Year, but other places that aren't China celebrate it, and it's based on the lunar calendar, so it's Lunar New Year. That's why I call it that. But then when we were supposed to be coming back to work, we got a message that we shouldn't come back to work, and we're taking another week off because of the coronavirus. Please let us know where you traveled, because if you travel to certain countries, you have to get a doctor's note to prove that you don't have the coronavirus before you return to work. And we did that with the students too. I was really pleased with that because not everybody did that during MERS. The school that I was with, for example, with MERS, we just kept teaching, and we were really pissed off because everybody else had shut down, but we had to keep teaching. And we thought, why are we putting ourselves at risk for what? Like, this is not super duper important that the students learn this grammar right now, you know what I mean? So we ended up doing that here, and when all the students came back, we had to do a this is how you don't spread it kind of thing. And we're still having to wear masks. We're wearing masks for the next foreseeable future. So the teachers have to wear masks, the students have to wear masks. Every time anybody comes to the school, we have to check their temperature. The students have to wipe down their stuff with like alcohol pads. So usually just their phone. So they wipe their phone down with an alcohol pad when they come in. Every time they go to a classroom, they have to wash their hands or wipe their hands with hand sanitizer. and we're really just really careful about it. Some of the teachers don't seem to care. I think it's just because one of the teachers that I was having issues with not being a responsible adult, still just acting like a child, so I had to have a talk with him, the head teacher had to talk with him, the principal had to talk with him about why you can't take off your mask and talk to your students without your mask on, and the students have to keep their masks on and can't talk to you, and you talk to them in their face while none of you are wearing your masks. But for the most part, people seem to get it, which is good. However, there's some interesting stuff that I think it doesn't apply to other countries. So one of the big things that we're having an issue with as citizens here is citizens, by that I mean people here. I don't mean like legal citizens necessarily, but just those of us that live here that aren't part of the government. One of the issues that we're having is the tax dollars. Some of our tax dollars are being used for the Korean government to help out Chinese people that are sick. So you've probably heard that there's a lot of quarantine stuff happening regarding Chinese visitors to other countries, or people that used to live in China that are going back to their native country. They're being quarantined. So for example, if you're a British national that lived in Wuhan, and then this whole thing happens, so you want to just get out of that area, go back to Britain until it dies down, then you're on quarantine for like 14 days. A lot of people are refusing Chinese travelers, not Chinese people, but Chinese nationals. So if you live in China, you've spent time in China, you're coming from China to visit another country, then you're just blocked. If you're a national of that target country, then you can come back from China, but you have to be on quarantine. But we're not doing that. I don't know if we still are, but we had told China that because it's really difficult for them to accept, to cover everybody with their existing hospitals. As you probably heard, Wuhan had to make like 2 hospitals emergency quick, just to cover the amount of people that needed hospitalization. So Korea is actually not only accepting Chinese nationals, but we're accepting them sick. So people that are actively sick with coronavirus, we're bringing them into China to treat them for free at our hospitals, which is not sitting well with a lot of Korean people. They don't think that President Moon is going to get another. They don't think he's going to get reelected. They're pretty, from what I've heard, a lot of people are pretty upset about this, and I mean that makes sense. Everybody else is denying them access to visit countries just in case they might have coronavirus because it spreads, and yet we're actively inviting them. Now, of course, this is with the idea, the hope, that they're being properly quarantined. So they arrive on a properly quarantined flight vessel. They are transported on properly quarantined transportation vehicles, and then once they reach the hospital, they're in a appropriately quarantined hospital. And, I get it. It's on the other hand, there's President Moon's stance, which is, well, we can't really deny our friends help in their time of need. And it's different, I think, when you're from a foreign country, especially the United States. The United States is so able to be economically independent from China. Of course, there's a lot of economic dependency from both of those countries, but both China and the United States are heavyweights, and they can be economically independent from each other. The United States' wealth does not depend heavily on China, and China's wealth does not depend heavily on the United States. They have so many other markets open that, yeah, it's going to affect, sales, but it's not going to be the worst thing. It's not like a final nail in the coffin to a business to say that we're not accepting Chinese purchases, or we're not going through China for manufacturing, and also for China to say stuff like that about the US. Korea, on the other hand, does still heavily rely on China, and that's part of the problem. So there's a lot of upset and, I guess, controversy between how much we should help China and how much we should reject China. a lot of stuff that China does, the Korean citizens aren't happy with, whether China actually does it or it's just perceived. One of the examples of the latter is this myth that China is polluting Seoul. It's not. Most of the pollution in Korea comes from Korea. And that was proven by NASA in 2016 because President Moon wanted to prove that China was causing most of our pollution. And so they got NASA to monitor it for a year, and NASA said, no, sorry, Korea, you're producing 80% of your own pollution. So there's this whole, Korea and China are not on very good terms, but Korea really needs China in a lot of economic ways. And so because of that, to deny China help at this time, I guess I would have to agree with President Moon. I don't think it's a good idea as a general statement, but I think as a political statement, I think it's probably a smart idea to maintain those that alliance with China. I mean, not like me personally, obviously, I'm not a politician, but I think from a political standpoint, I can see why he did it. So that's an interesting thing. But it's I don't think tons of stuff has changed here just because of it. I don't know anybody that's caught the coronavirus. I do know that all of our students, we had to make sure that those students that did go on vacation, that they cannot return unless they get a doctor's note that basically says we've checked and they don't have coronavirus. Other than that, I mean, everything's kind of continuing as normal, I would say. Just, yeah, the big difference is everybody's wearing masks for the most part, you know? People are still going to coffee shops, people are still going out, we're still buying food, we're still ordering delivery. It's just most people wear masks now. So it is on the forefront of our mind, 100%. There's a bunch of signs and stuff everywhere, which I'll post in this not in the video, but on the Patreon portion. There's just signs that are written in Korean, Chinese written language, and some of them are written in English, which I thought was kind of strange. Usually when they post a sign, especially like an emergency sign or some kind of heavy notification sign, especially for public health, it's written in Korean and English because there's a lot of people that speak English in Korea that are not able to speak Korean, or they're not able to understand written Korean. You know, I'm talking tourists, I'm talking business people that come here for business travel. So to me, that's a little odd that there are this one place that I have to pass through pretty frequently. Their signs are only in Korean and Chinese, which I thought was really interesting. It just really shows. It makes me wonder, is it because they didn't want to make a third one in English? But I've seen them in English in other places. So it makes me also wonder, is it because they feel like outsiders who aren't Korean or Chinese would have a better understanding of wearing a mask? Is that what it is? Like, I don't know. Like, do they just trust that we're already wearing a mask and we already know how to wash our hands? I don't know. It's interesting. The hygiene issue has been pretty interesting here, just because, you know, a lot of Korea, you know, the culture has changed and is still changing. I mean, as every culture does, but you have to remember this country was, you know, bombed into matchsticks back in the early 50s, and they became a super amazing economic powerhouse within just a few decades. But that kind of doesn't mean that the culture is as fast to catch up. And so some of the cultural stuff, it's a little back. So it makes me kind of wonder, if I still lived in the rural area where I started off in Korea, what's going on there? You know, are they still business as usual? Nobody wears a mask? Are they wearing masks? People paying attention to flushing the toilet? You know, I don't know. It's interesting because we still have people that, like the older people especially, you know, they put their toilet paper into the wastebasket in the stall, the public stall. They put it into the wastebasket instead of in the toilet because they're, you know, back in the day, the plumbing system couldn't handle toilet paper. Now it can, but there's this belief that it still can't. And, you know, a lot of older people will wipe their shit, and then take that shit toilet paper and put it into the wastebasket. And I just think, isn't that not only bad for the smell, but I mean, isn't that some kind of hazard, you know, especially for someone to clean up? There's people that still urinate in the toilet, on the toilet seat. They don't wipe it and they don't flush it. You know, there's still people that do that. So it's kind of interesting. You know, that happens in the US, but that usually happens because the person's like just being an asshole, or they've got some kind of medical issue, like a mental issue or physical issue, where it makes it very difficult to remember to flush the toilet or to physically flush the toilet. But in this case, it's just like, no, this is how we've always done it. You know, so it's been interesting. But for the most part, it's like, stay home as much as you can and wear a mask if you go out. You know, everybody's got hand sanitizer. A friend of ours had given a bunch of hand sanitizer, and so like one of our mutual friends had given a hand sanitizer to us, the friend group. And just fun fact, don't put a hand sanitizer in your nose. So you do the thing where you open and you try to smell it. You kind of squeeze it to get that like air, the air that has the smell, to puff up into your nose so you can smell it better. It shot the damn hand sanitizer into my nostril. And I went to wipe it, but as I wiped it, it just like, I realized how much was there. I thought it was like a blop, like a little boop, you know? But it turns out it was like a big amount that had sprayed into my nose. And I found myself like, I couldn't breathe. It was like my airway had just kind of shut, and it was not like an allergic reaction. It was just like a constriction suddenly. Sort of like if you're breathing something and it's like you breathe something really sour smelling, like a very hefty amount of, like if you got vinegar in your nose, for example, your body would like try to not breathe it in, right? So that had happened. So I went to the bathroom and I tried to get the toilet paper, but it was like new toilet paper. And I was just like ripping at it, like, please, because I couldn't breathe. I finally got it out and my ears had started popping because, you know, ear, nose, and throat, they're all connected, right? And like it burned, like it felt like a warm burn in here and like in the whole like nasal area. So I guess don't do that unless that's what you want to do to somebody. Then you should do it to somebody. Speaking of, you know, trying to tell the students of what to do and what not to do for the coronavirus, one of the things that they're not supposed to do is like touch each other. You know, touch your friends to a minimum. So it's stuff like, you know, guys, don't hold hands, don't share drinks, don't share food. You know, if your friend starts crying, you know, don't wipe their tears. If your friend's nose starts dripping, don't wipe their nose. And all the kids are like, ew, ha ha ha. And then I told them, I guess you could punch your friend as long as you don't punch him in the mouth. You could kick them. Yeah, okay, so kick your friends so you don't spread coronavirus. So that became the unofficial slogan for my class, is kick your friends to contain coronavirus. So they all know I'm joking, which is good, because I say a lot of that weird shit and they love it. They think it's hilarious, which is good that they think it's hilarious, because that's why I say it, so they pay attention. You know, if you go through like, don't forget to wash your hands, blah, 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 the students kind of just zone out. But if you start saying weird shit, they start paying attention. So that's, that kind of works in my favor, that I just do that naturally. Anyway, hope you guys are safe and healthy and all that good stuff. And if you guys have any specific questions about the coronavirus, then please let me know. Yeah, that's all I got for you right now. All right, talk to you later.